looking, throwing in the end zone.
Montana, touchdown, John Taylor.
Young to the air, Young to Jerry Rice, touchdown San Francisco.
Young stumbles on the way back and fires up the middle. Pass is caught by Owens.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm your host, Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis, plus timely and entertaining sports and pop culture topics. And today we're going to be talking about Christian McCaffrey gracing the cover of Madden 2025, why it's not really a curse anymore. We are going to go over McCaffrey's usage and how that is going to have to change, and how this actually may be a way to reverse the Madden curse. We're going to be talking Brandon Aiyuk's contract update. It was reported he was offered $26 million. We're going to get into that. Whispers that Trent Williams might want a new deal. Thoughts there, and conclude the Niners section with state of the franchise thoughts. I watched the hour-plus long video, have a few thoughts as well there. In the plus section, going to be discussing Star Wars The Acolyte Episode 3, Silo Season 1 from Apple TV, and in comic books, X-Men The Krakoa Age comes to an end. But like always, it starts with the Niners, so let's get right into it.
Let's talk Niners!
So Christian McCaffrey will be your cover athlete for Madden 2025, coming out mid-August. He is the first 49er on the cover of Madden since Garrison Hurst from the 1999 international version of Madden, and the third 49er player overall to be on the cover, or the third most recent. William Floyd was on the PlayStation football game NFL Game Day back in the mid-90s. And McCaffrey being on the cover, this is something that he was pumped about. Playing Madden with his two brothers growing up. It was, a childhood dream, as he described it, to be on the cover. McCaffrey does not believe in curses. He does not believe that's a thing. And based on the historic numbers going from essentially Madden 2001, because on Madden 2000, John Madden appeared on the cover. So you still have basically 24 cover athletes, because Madden again was on the cover for one of the more recent anniversary editions of Madden. More than half of the players were not cursed, quote unquote, the following year. I think it was 14 were not, 10 were. And most recently, in the last 10 years, only 2 of the last 10 players you would deem as cursed. Unfortunately, or fortunately, or indifferent, however you want to look at it, only Patrick Mahomes won the Super Bowl the year after appearing on the cover of Madden. He appeared on the Madden 2020 cover. And remember, that the year is a year ahead of the actual NFL season. So that was the Madden 2020 cover for the 2019 NFL season, where the Chiefs beat the Niners in Miami. I am a superstitious person. I think the majority of us, when we heard McCaffrey was the cover athlete, we probably at the very least curled our toes and contracted our sphincters, bracing for the possible impact of an injury or some sort of a curse. And remember, it's not players that have been cursed. It could also be a team curse. It does not mean production falling off of a cliff, or an injury where you miss a significant amount of time, or a season-ending injury. It could mean the team just flops the next year, regardless of how productive the cover athlete is or is not. I think beyond a curse, I think what San Francisco needs to be aware of, and specifically Kyle Shanahan, Bobby Turner, others on the offensive staff, moving forward with McCaffrey signing his extension, and I talked about this last podcast, is his usage. The past 2 seasons, remember 2022, he split time between Carolina and San Francisco. In 2022, he had 244 carries and 85 receptions for 329 total touches. And then when you get to the playoffs, that's another 52, so 381 total touches in 2022 and a prolonged season getting to the NFC Championship game. 2023, his first full year with San Francisco, 272 carries, 67 receptions equals 339 total touches. So 28 more carries, 18 fewer receptions from 2022, all comes to 10 total touches more year over year. But then another 78 in the playoffs gives you a number of 417 total touches. Now, 400 plus touches has historically been a danger number, or even near that number of touches. Someone like a Chris Johnson, DeMarco Murray of the Cowboys, Chris Johnson of the Titans, Eddie George going back to the 90s of the Oilers and then Titans. Once those numbers crept up into the high 300s, mid to high 300s or more, there was a drop-off the following season. And a lot of things have to be taken into consideration. At what point in their career were they getting that high number of touches? Were they in their late 20s? Did they just hit 30? Were they younger? Were the touches, like in an Eddie George or DeMarco Murray case, mainly rushes, where you have a greater possibility of taking a pounding versus receptions? Regardless, Shanahan knows they need to ease the wear and tear on McCaffrey's body moving forward. It's just so difficult because he is obviously so dynamic in everything that he does with the football. And when you look at, the carries will be the place where we could shave, or we're not shaving anything. Shanahan, Bobby Turner, whoever's going to shave some carries, even if McCaffrey doesn't want to come out. And that was something that Kyle Shanahan said when asked about McCaffrey's usage. Now, when you look at his carries last season, 272 carries, it was only over 16 games. He did not play the final game. So when you look at that on a per game average, that's 17 carries. Right off the bat, that's not terrible. Like when you're talking about workhorse backs, Emmitt Smith, going back, into the 90s, other backs, and Emmitt Smith was a 3-down back at times, but that was a severely run-centric Dallas offense. He was getting the ball 20 to 25 times a game. So he was easily into the mid-300s. And, Emmitt Smith, someone like a Barry Sanders, Adrian Peterson, you just have backs sometimes that are just built different. Frank Gore being a productive, we'll say, workhorse light back into his mid-30s, early to mid-30s. 17 carries a game, guys, isn't a lot. So the shaving of carries, shaving of touches, even the year before where he was at 244 over 16 games, 15 carries, 15 and a quarter. You want to take 2 or 3 carries away from McCaffrey if you want to get him from 17 down to maybe 12, 13, or 14. Okay, 3 carries a quarter. That's what that's going to average. The numbers in some seem high, but when you break it down per game, it's not bad. And even, 67 receptions last year divided by 16 games is 4 receptions a game. He is a 3 to 6 reception, per game player, and maybe a 15 to 18 carry a game player. So you're talking, 18 to 25 touches a game. But he is, as called by offensive line coach Chris Forrester, the heartbeat of the offense. And you talk about, the NBA Finals being on, how the offense runs through certain players. The 49er offense runs through Christian McCaffrey. How much they can shave off his workload remains to be seen. But remember, guys, his high year in San Francisco was, quote unquote, only 17 carries a game. We'll see how Shanahan and others can finagle the math to give McCaffrey, a breather. And, 2 less carries a game is, 30 plus, 32, 34 less carries on a season. That's essentially, 2 games worth of carries if you want to think about it like that. Every little bit's going to help. But it's not an astronomical number, and McCaffrey is just so exceptional at everything that it's going to be tough for him to want to come out, or at times for Shanahan to want to come out. So Mason, Mitchell, Guerendo, Schrader, Patrick Taylor, whoever the 3 are behind McCaffrey, show some added utility, guys. Step up, level up, and be that valued potential, third down back number 2 or third down back B that I think San Francisco is looking for, at least from a rest standpoint for McCaffrey. And going back to this curse thing real quick, if people think San Francisco is already cursed, and you see it a lot on social media, started out 5-0 in Super Bowls, now they're 0-3, they've lost 2 recent NFC championship games, they can't get over the hump. If we're calling that a curse, maybe McCaffrey being on the cover of Madden is a way to reverse the curse, right? Let's get some t-shirts made up. Reverse the curse. McCaffrey, Madden, Super Bowl time. And I think, being superstitious, if we're looking for something spiritual, mystical, otherworldly to hang our hat on or look to, I'm going to go back to comparing the 49ers and Chiefs. The Niners have lost 3 straight games to them, 2 in the playoffs, to San Francisco against the Cowboys in 92 and 93. Lost 3 straight games to them, 2 in the playoffs in the NFC Championship game. In 94, San Francisco beat Dallas at home. And then in the playoffs, the NFC Championship game, beat Dallas again en route to a Super Bowl victory. The Niners have the Chiefs at home this year. And this season will be the 30th anniversary of the 94 Super Bowl team. I'm not saying the stars are aligning. I'm not saying, if you believe in signs. But folks, if you want to put stock in a Madden curse, and there's more maybe proof in the Madden curse, if even like 40% of the players were quote unquote cursed and didn't perform as well, or the team didn't perform as well the following year. 30th anniversary, team that they can't get over, lost twice in the playoffs. It might be lining up for San Francisco this year. Now let's move from curses or lack thereof to Brandon Aiyuk's contract. And we're not going to say that getting a contract done that they're cursed, but it has been reported this week that the 49ers offer to Aiyuk was $26 million annually, which, if true, puts him in the range of Devonta Smith, Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, and Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle, even though he's a number 2 receiver on Miami, is statistically the closest comp to Brandon Aiyuk. And even though when you look it up, Jalen Waddle's average annual value is $28.5 million, when you actually look at the money he's going to get, all but the final year of the contract, it comes to about 26 and a half. So I think that's the most comparable, and in a way, even though Waddle's a 2 and Aiyuk's a 1, it's not about, I'm a number 1 receiver, I'm on this sort of team. It's about what you're putting up statistically. And if Aiyuk and his camp want to complain about usage and targets and not getting as many opportunities, but then pointing to yards per catch where he has a pretty healthy average, you can't really do it both ways, right, guys? You can't talk out of both sides of your mouth. Jalen Waddle is Brandon Aiyuk's statistical comp. Above Waddle at $28.5 million, you have Justin Jefferson. Aiyuk is not in Justin Jefferson's league of $35.5 million a year, which is a legit $35.5 million. Tyreek Hill at 30, AJ Brown at 30, and St. Brown from Detroit, Amon-Ra, at 30 or close to 30 as well. But again, that comes in at about 28 and a half once that phony money comes off the back end. One other thing about this $26 million annual offer that I think we should be asking, since no one is stating it. When was this offer made? Was this offer made a day or two before it was reported? So sometime in early June? Was this offered in March, in April, in May? If $26 million per year annually with minimal phony baloney money on the back end was offered to Brandon Aiyuk 2 to 3 months ago, he would have taken it. Why? Because Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, and Amon-Ra St. Brown did not get their extensions yet. So he would have been that or Justin Jefferson, he would have been that next tier of wide receiver ones that are setting the market for, tier 2 receivers. But we don't know when that was offered. And remember too, everybody under the sun is blaming San Francisco for not getting this deal done. What if it's Aiyuk and his agent that are just absolutely adamant about we are not going to sign anything until we see all other receivers sign so we can get a better idea of what my value is? This very well could be a waiting game by Aiyuk and his representation. And it's never being, at least that I've seen, it's not being discussed like that. There's still over a month until training camp starts. The 49ers historically, I've said this other podcast, and I'm sure you guys know, between Debo and Fred Warner, George Kittle, Nick Bosa last offseason, get these things done late. And we don't know the reason why. If the Niners are negotiating, maybe not every day, but until the 11th hour. And John Lynch has come out and said these things usually don't gain traction until there's a deadline. Well, if that's the case, explain to me AJ Brown's new deal, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Waddle. We don't know whose side is taking more of a hard line. And now there are reports from journalists, respected journalists, and not quite as respected social media people that now believing Aiyuk is not going to sign. And whether that means he gets traded to Pittsburgh, someone in Pittsburgh winds up being the team that they keep saying he's being traded to. And whoever is floating that nonsense knows nothing. And it's sad when an opinion winds up becoming a trending story. It's not a story. It's an opinion, and a bad one. But folks are believing that Aiyuk that there's a good chance he's not going to sign. And again, I say why. We got over a month, close to 40 days until training camp starts. The cost argument. How much are they going to give Aiyuk X amount of money when, Debo's already making X amount, and then you have Brock Purdy going to be getting his deal at the end of the season. The cost argument is stupid, guys. The cost argument is a non-factor, guys, because if Aiyuk signing frees up money, one, it would lower his cap hit by $10 million, which would then be rolled into next season. And right now, the 49ers are, if the Niners roll over all their cap that they have currently, they're only $5 million over the cap for next year. They've made some significant strides into cutting into that. And there are players that could be extended. Warner, Kittle. If they want to extend Hargrave, I wouldn't. If anything, I would designate him a post-June 1st release to save $20 million. Trading Debo could save between either $9 million or $17 million, depending on when pre or post-June 1st that he's traded. The cost argument doesn't matter. It is literally irrelevant because what you're telling me is San Francisco is a team that can't have a high-priced quarterback when Purdy gets it, one high-priced receiver, a high-priced D-tackle, high-priced D-end, and high-priced linebacker. Otherwise, they have mid-tier cost players, and McCaffrey, mid-tier cost players are lower, just like every other team has. The other thing too is, why is it only San Fran? You got to trade Aiyuk. Aiyuk's not gonna sign. He may play out on his 5th-year extension, but if he holds out for a certain amount of time, his 5th year doesn't accrue, meaning he doesn't get credit for it. And in 2025, that will be considered his 5th year. Aiyuk's getting fined for not participating in mandatory OTAs, and it sounds like, at least reports, and always the reports are negative because they want to drum up interest. San Francisco has no interest in waiving those fines. They'll waive them. Aiyuk's their wide receiver 1. They'll waive them, just like they will waive them for Bosa, etc. And again, too, what's the other option, guys? Let's talk about what's the other option. You trade Brandon Aiyuk. You get now, let's say, you get a draft pick or 2 for next year. Doesn't help you this year. Makes you worse this year. Maybe you get a player. You're not getting a receiver back or anyone that's going to really emulate that production or even 50% of the production. Ricky Pearsall is not ready to assume that role. Juwan Jennings is not an outside wide receiver, which we've established many times on this podcast. And then what's the play? You trade Aiyuk and then you what? Extend Debo? Who plays with the physicality and has a body type that's been prone to injury that will probably break down well before Aiyuk does? Is that the plan that people are thinking is, well, if trading Aiyuk, or you trade Aiyuk and then you still say you can't afford Debo and you trade him also? No, guys. No. You sign Aiyuk, you save $10 million on this cap, you trade Debo, you figure out some things in 2025, players you want to extend or release. And remember, extending is going to save about $10 million for Kittle, $10 million for Warner. It would save quite a bit on Hargrave, but again, I think he's someone that should get released just to get a little bit younger at defensive tackle. But, why is it only the Niners? What about CeeDee Lamb? Why is there no talk about him getting traded? Don't the Cowboys owe Micah Parsons a contract? Don't they owe Dak Prescott another contract? And they're not turning it over to Trey Lance, guys. Trey Lance is going to be a career backup quarterback. They wasted a 4th-round pick on him. He's not going to be anything. There is no way the Cowboys are going to let Dak Prescott walk in 2025 and take a $40 million dead cap hit on next year's cap. No way. He gets re-signed. Why is there no talk of Jamar Chase, T. Higgins getting traded? You can't pay both of them. Why aren't the Bengals super urgent to trade T. Higgins? Because you don't want to lose him for nothing. And I'm sure they're working on maybe like some sort of an extension, but if the Niners can't pay both, why does everyone think the Bengals could pay both? Why aren't Chase or Higgins? Where is the significant media talk about trading Lamb, Chase, or Higgins the way that it always comes back to either trading Debo or Aiyuk? I don't get it. One possibility is because next season, the Cowboys and Bengals are both at least $30 million over the cap. So maybe the money aspect of it matters to a certain degree. But it's only a Niner receiver that has to move. Now, one thing before we get into another player who potentially might get another deal, Brock Purdy, just so you guys are aware, when he gets extended, his first year cap hit will be between $25 and $30 million. And I'm using Jared Goff's as a guide. His cap hit being, I think, about $27 million, taking into account the extension that he got. The question is, will that be for the 2025 or 2026 cap? Remember, Purdy's still under contract for 2025, and his cap hit's about $1 million. When he gets extended, something has to go on the 2025 cap. Some additional cap figure due to a guaranteed at signing, overall guarantees, how they structure the contract. Maybe it's not 25 to 30 million, maybe it's 15 million, and maybe the next year is 30, 35, just to ease the hit on 2025 a bit. I don't know. I'm not a capologist. I'm just saying at some point, Brock's going to start costing at least 25 to 30 million and then going up each year. What could help is Trent Williams. It's been rumored that he wants a new deal. Like Christian McCaffrey, Trent Williams has no guaranteed money remaining on his deal, which runs through 2026, 3 more years. 2027 is a void year in his contract with a $3.6 million dead cap hit number. Apparently, and I've looked into this not extensively, so please don't hold my feet to the fire, but apparently a restructure or extension, let's say restructure, would save $14 million per season on the cap the next 2 to 3 seasons. How would that happen? Because it would be signing bonus money that would accelerate and be actual cash put into Trent Williams' pocket this year and and mostly this year, but then the rest would be kind of trickled out through the remaining years of the contract above and beyond Trent Williams' $20 million base salary for 2024. A restructure wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. An extension with Trent Williams being 36, I'm not sure how I feel about that. How long is he going to play for? Realistically. Now, I know, everyone says he's a freak athlete, keeps himself in great shape. His production this year compared to the past 2 years per Pro Football Focus grades did dip both in pass blocking and run blocking. Not to say that it's going to dip again, but athletes, big old dudes like offensive linemen, they're not going to age like wine or cheese. But I'm not going to say he's going to fall off a cliff either. But at 36, how long is he going to, and it may not matter how long is he going to play for, just if he gives them cap relief in 2024, 2025, and maybe 2026. Look at it this way. If San Francisco wins the Super Bowl, and we're all hoping for that, you could see Trent Williams retiring, riding off into the sunset, Super Bowl champion, first ballot lock Hall of Famer. Now, when that happens, and I did not do research into that, I apologize, what does the 49er cap hit look like? Does anything accelerate? Would 2025 be more of a hit if he's retired versus not playing? I don't know. I didn't do the research. I apologize. I do know that there is a way that the cap hit can be finagled based on what Drew Brees did when he retired. I think he announced his retirement at a certain point and reworked his contract in a way that he was only owed like the vet minimum base salary or something close to that versus the 20 plus, million that Trent Williams would be owed. And if you retire, you don't get your base salary. You don't get your normal weekly checks anymore, of course. Or if you get cut, it just winds up becoming, what's guaranteed, what's prorated, whatever's remaining on the deal in that standpoint. But Trent Williams asking for a new deal, it's not greed. He was the highest paid left tackle. He no longer is. I think he's coming, second or third or fourth on the list. He's still top 5. And even if his play drops a little bit more from what it did in 2023 last season, that's okay. He's still a top 5 left tackle. I don't know if his restructure is as much of a reward of how prolific he is, like in the case of McCaffrey winning Offensive Player of the Year. Yes, Trent Williams was a first-team All-Pro. But 36, the Niners may look at it as, hey, and it's going to come down to Jed York. If Jed York's willing to shell out, tens of millions of dollars more this season for Trent to save $14 million-ish on the cap this year and the next 2 years. And we'll conclude the 49ers section. I just want to give some thoughts on the state of the franchise meeting video that the 49ers put out a couple days ago. Watched it in length. It was interesting to hear, Shanahan, Lynch, some coaches, some players talk and give their thoughts. It's been 10 years of Levi's Stadium already. That went by quick. San Francisco 6-0 in the playoffs there, 2-0 in NFC Championship games. So, I've said to friends, I don't know how much of a home field advantage Levi's Stadium is. It does. When you say Levi's, at least, it doesn't sound like Lambeau or Arrowhead or, the Superdome. I'm forgetting the name of the field where Seattle plays, or, Buffalo, Baltimore, Philadelphia, places that you feel like historically have had a home field advantage. I've just never felt that way about Levi's, and I'm probably wrong on that based on, at least in the playoffs, Niner fans are bringing in and the Niners are performing, but 10 years went by fast. And, a couple things that John Lynch had stated, the need to rework their D-line, stability on the D-line after releasing Eric Armstead, signing a Leonard Floyd, and he called him a presence opposite Nick Bosa. And they have not had a presence. They thought it was going to be Chase Young, but they haven't had a presence since Dee Ford in the couple games he was healthy in 2019. Yetur Gross-Matos, it's apparent that John Lynch and defensive coordinator Nick Sorenstam are high on him, that the arrow is pointing up. And to bring 2 D ends in and 2 D tackles, Jordan Elliott from the Browns and Malik Collins via trade from the Texans, that is a rework to go with existing pieces like a Bosa, a Drake Jackson, a Robert Beal, Javon Hargrave, Kevin Givens. They've remade basically 50% of their D-line. That's a good amount of turnover, and it was a line that was not great against the run second half of the season and certainly in the playoffs. And part of that spending in free agency is because John Lynch and the coaching staff thought that the quality of the D-line in the draft wasn't that great. And they didn't draft a defensive lineman. It was an undrafted rookie free agent, Evan Anderson, out of Florida Atlantic, was the only lineman, rookie lineman that they brought in. But this is a defense, a defensive line, and a roster that, as John Lynch, had said, and I've heard other people say before, you're either getting better or you're getting worse. You're never staying the same. And it's impossible to stay the same in sports, as every sports team, in every sport, the roster is never identical one year to the next, right? And I think what the Niners did in free agency, addressing some needs and concerns and supplementing that in the draft, looking not only to address depth issues this year, infusing the roster with some young talent, but then an eye to next year. Maybe Ricky Pearsall is a starting receiver next year. Maybe Malik Mustafa is a starting safety next year. Maybe Dominic Puny is a starting guard next year. But good depth right now, young depth that they need to learn. But they're not going to be thrown into the fire, which wouldn't be smart, right? You can't, if you're a rebuilding team, if you're Carolina, throw as many rookies into the fire as you can, right? You're not going to be very good. But not for a team, like San Francisco. And Kyle Shanahan, added on to that, and it was interesting. He said, listen, when we came here, we asked Jed York, can you be patient for a couple years? Because we knew we had some work to do. 2019 got to the Super Bowl, obviously the COVID year afterwards, a lot of injuries, but have been going for it 2021, 22, 23, every year since, and hopefully every subsequent year upcoming. And that's what he said. He's like, we are going for it every year, but you can't be irresponsible just giving draft picks away, giving players away, and expecting to replace them with draft picks automatically, or spending irresponsibly, giving away poor contracts unnecessarily. And the flip side of that is be careful how you're restructuring, be careful how you're extending, because with short-term cap relief comes potential long-term cap ramifications, which is sometimes, I'm not going to say often, but offset with the salary cap continuing to go up. So but even with that mentality, right, the cap goes up, that means player costs go up because teams have more money to spend, more competition, salaries increase. So I do like this responsibility of short-term success, but still maintaining a long-term foundation. And I think San Francisco, as long as Kyle and John have been there now 7 years, and it was called a bromance by one of the hosts, which was amusing. Even with losses they're going to have that happened this past offseason, this next offseason, the following offseason after that, as long as they draft relatively well, you're not going to hit on all your picks. If you can hit on half your picks in any given year, you're doing a good job. Making smart, sound decisions in free agency. Players that not only have the talent, but have the cultural and scheme fit to be a 49er. I think they're going to be there. And then you just want a ticket to the dance, because the best team doesn't always make into the NFC Championship game or a championship game or get to the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl. But you need a ticket to be there, and then let the cards fall where they may. And, Nick Sorensen, the defensive coordinator, spoke for a little bit, per Kyle, the players like his energy, knows the scheme, is excited to be taking on this role, excited to have Brandon Staley as another brain to, pick defensively. And since Nick's been here in charge of the secondary, San Francisco led the NFL in interceptions the past 2 seasons. Teammates and the coaching staff call him the ball father, because he was holding weekly meetings about how to generate more turnovers, protect the ball when you get an interception, ripping the ball out even for ball carriers. Players seem to like him, has the energy of a Ryans, of a Robert Saleh. Might not be as animated as Robert Saleh on the sidelines or jumping up and down, but certainly not going to be as reserved a person as the previous defensive coordinator. But he talked a little bit just about the scheme, wanting to play downhill, fast, violent, not looking to change things up tremendously, wants to tighten up the run defense. Excited about the secondary, feels like it's the best secondary depth that they've had since he's been here. And just excited to get the guys back in rookie minicamp, voluntary OTAs, mandatory OTAs, and then when training camp kicks off, 30 plus days from now. So that concludes the 49ers section of the podcast. Please stick around. We're going to be talking Star Wars The Acolyte Episode 3, Silo Season 1 on Apple TV, and comic books, The X-Men Krakoa Age, coming to an end. Stay with us.
It's plus time.
So let's talk Star Wars The Acolyte Episode 3 and start off by saying that I'm a complete moron thinking that new episodes drop on Wednesdays when they actually drop on Tuesdays. Historically, like Ahsoka and other Disney Plus content used to release on Wednesdays. So I guess I completely disregarded any advertisements I saw and just had a Wednesday mindset. But on the East Coast, Tuesdays at 9 p.m. are when new episodes drop. And this third episode focused specifically on a backstory of the twins, Osha and the Acolyte, the evil character, May. When they were younger, I'd say probably around 10 years old. They live on a planet, basically in the cliffs or mountains, on a planet where their mothers are part of a coven of witches who can tap into the Force. One is actually a Zabrak species. That's what Darth Maul is. And they discuss using the Force, but they call it pulling on the thread. And throughout Star Wars canon and defunct non-canon, there have been different types of Force users, sects of Force users, that call it something different. I thought this was an interesting addition to Force mythology. The episode, without going into too many I'm probably going to give all spoilers. The twins were going to be indoctrinated into this belief system. We're not going to call it a cult or anything. Belief system. And their mother, asking each child if they, want to bear the responsibility and be part of the coven, and then kind of touches the forehead and imbues some energy or a blessing, whatever it may be, it's not discussed, into the child. May gets it done first. Osha is hesitant to do that. And before the mother can, bless her on the forehead, Jedi come into their chamber and state that, they hear that there are two children that are being, trained in the ways of the Force. It's interesting, what I'm about to talk about next is in a way, some of the most interesting and important Jedi and Force discussions or happenings throughout at least live action shows and movies. The witches state that the planet that they're on, the Republic has no jurisdiction over them. The planet is not a part of the Republic. They're not in the Senate, anything like that. But the Jedi still hear and find that there are these two twin Force users and basically state that they need to be trained if they, should they want to become Jedi. There is, and Carrie Ann Moss makes her, return, since it is a flashback. And in this scene are the four Jedi that, May, the Acolyte, when she grows up, are hunting down and trying to kill. Even though, Carrie Ann Moss asks the mother's permission to test the children, it more or less comes across as a mandate. There are tensions between the Coven of Witches, the other mother, the one who is not the leader, is shouting back at Jedi. It looks like, she wants to draw weapons. So here you get a sense of, do parents really, in the Star Wars galaxy, can parents say no to Jedi if a child tests and is Force sensitive, I guess, to the point, has a high enough midichlorian count? They actually do take a blood sample from one of the twins, but they just say it's a blood sample. They don't use the M word. I think the M word is dirty for a lot of Star Wars people and creators not named George Lucas. But do parents have a say? And these children, since they're 10 years old, they're old enough that if they, when they test, if they want to become Jedi, they can. And the mother asks both daughters, since she doesn't know what the Jedi are going to ask, to whatever they ask, say the opposite. If they're testing you and one of the tests is, behind, a screen, they're asking the girls what they see. And the one girl, Osha, is messing up on purpose, but she's really nervous about it and slips up. And the Jedi ask her, why are you lying? Do you want to become a Jedi, etc. May, the one who turns into the Acolyte, wants to stay. She says she has everything that she needs right here, but Osha does not want to share everything with her twin and wants to explore the galaxy. When Osha tells her mother that she wants to be a Jedi, her mother says, she looks obviously very upset about that, but her words are, I will talk with the other witches and we will take your wishes into consideration. Meaning, even if the Jedi say that she wants to be a Jedi or that they're going to take her, that there's going to be resistance from the Coven. They leave this ambiguous. And what winds up happening is Osha's in her room. She tells her mother and her sister she wants to leave, and May locks her in her room and starts a fire. And up until this point, I was really fascinated by just the dynamics and will the Jedi forcibly take Osha? But then her sister May, after locking the door, says, if you leave, I'll kill you. Which then that just became well, why are you going to do that? You'd rather end her life than her going somewhere else, which in a sense you could think that she's dead to you by just letting her leave. So that took me out of it a little bit in terms of that choice. But May starts a fire that kind of, it doesn't look like it spreads really that far beyond Osha's room, but Osha's able to escape through some sort of a porthole somewhere else. Her and her sister are on opposite ends of a bridge that are broken. The bridge falls. Saul, the Jedi, winds up saving Osha. The home where the Coven of Witches living is destroyed. As they're walking through, Osha sees her mother lying there dead, a bunch of witches lying there dead, which was, I guess meant to confuse the audience. We're like, this was all caused by a fire in one girl's bedroom. So obviously there was, I shouldn't say obvious because nothing is for certain in this world, but it seems like there was a battle between the Jedi and the witches because the witches say you probably said you can't take the girls, and the Jedi maybe slaughter them. And maybe the fire had a little something to do with distracting the witches. Who knows? Maybe they'll go into more detail next episode. So the episode ends with Osha on her way to Coruscant to be trained. Now, she's 10 years old. She washes out of the Jedi Order around when she's 20 and then winds up obviously becoming a mechanic for the Trade Federation the past 6 years. But I wonder, since this takes place 100 years before The Phantom Menace, if Osha is a cautionary tale for the Jedi Council, and Yoda, and why they tell Qui-Gon in episode 1 that Anakin, who's probably around the same age, maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, is too old to be trained. Now, that very well may have been a mandate or a rule that the Jedi Order have had for centuries. That probably is the case. I don't know. But the episode ultimately ends with May being alive because she's alive and she's stuck on her home planet with no family. So Osha thinks May's dead. May thinks Osha's dead. And May has significant resentment of the Jedi for what they did to their home. Although May's the one that started the fire. Did May also see the 4 Jedi come in and kill her mothers and the other witches? Hopefully that'll be revealed. A couple other things of note, wonder if the Jedi were so into May and Osha because they're twins. Are they going to explore this idea of the Force dyad that the Star Wars sequels explored between Rey and Kylo Ren? Don't know. And then there was seemed like a throwaway line, but will probably hold more importance if explained, as one mother of the twins said to the other mother, what if the Jedi, like one mother carried the two twins to term, but she said to the other mother, what if they find out how you conceive them? Or I don't know if she used the word created. Cloning, I don't know what's going to be involved there. The girls were played by two different actresses. Not like that matters because they are played by the same actress, in the present day when they're in their 20s. But a good episode. Again, this series is getting so much hate. I liked how they introduced new Force users, what their philosophy was, and showed the Jedi as possible kidnappers, possible, an early version of what the First Order was. Like, they were kidnapping young people and indoctrinating them into the First Order way. In the sequel trilogy, the Jedi very well may be doing the same thing under the guise of, well, this is what's better for the Republic. No one thinks of themselves as bad guys, right? The First Order could be kidnapping young children, promising young children, because it's for the good of the galaxy, the safety and security of the galaxy. I am intrigued by where the Acolyte is going. We have 5 episodes remaining. How much more they're going to dive into Force lore. I'm sure they're going to reveal what the Jedi actually did at some point and who May's mentor or master is, if that's going to be revealed. Again, hopefully it's someone from Star Wars lore and not somebody. Someone new would be fine too, but it'd be nice to just kind of build upon all the great characters that have been established the last 25, 30 years, going back to Star Wars books. But episode 3, I will remember that Tuesday, episode 4 will drop at 9:00 Eastern. So let's move on to another TV show, Silo, on Apple TV, season 1, starring Rebecca Ferguson, Paul Atreides' mother from the 2 recent Dune movies. She was also in The Greatest Showman with Hugh Jackman. Also, Tim Robbins is in it playing a prominent role. The story winds up being sometime in the future, humanity, about 10,000 people, are living in an underground silo, about 140 plus levels deep. And the show starts out with focusing on the sheriff of the silo and his wife, who works in IT. She's curious. She starts questioning, why things are the way they are. There was a previous rebellion or multiple previous rebellions in the hundreds of years, or however long the silo's been in existence. It hasn't been specifically stated. And she gets so curious about things that she wants to go outside and explore. And when you say the words in this show, I want to go outside, that's essentially a death sentence. That when someone says that, or unless you're an absolute heinous criminal, you're sent outside, the toxic, catastrophic environment, and they can see outside. They have windows through sensors. They can see a view of outside, and it's just a barren wasteland with one dilapidated tree and a bunch of dead people who are in almost astronaut suits who were sent outside because of, they asked to go, they went crazy, or they committed some sort of a crime. And when they go out, they clean the main video sensor to see outside. And as the season goes on, the mystery becomes, is outside as barren and as much of a wasteland as they're seeing inside on the screens? Or is it a green and lush and healthy, livable land, and the people in the silo that are running the silo don't want residents to know that for whatever reason? And I'll just leave it there. I'll go into some other story beats. The sheriff a couple years later goes nuts, starts kind of trying to unravel a mystery, and can't really bear to be, without his wife anymore, even though his wife dies, a few minutes after she goes out into this, barren world of Earth. He states that he wants to go outside, goes outside, to clean, and, he gets a revelation of what the world outside is or isn't. In between, Rebecca Ferguson's character is basically like the number one mechanic of the lower levels who keeps the huge generator churning to give electricity to the 140 plus levels of this silo. She winds up falling in love with a character named George, who comes across a hard drive and it starts uncovering secrets of the silo, winds up uncovering, actually Rebecca Ferguson's character winds up finding a passageway in what they call the down deep, one of the lowest levels, where they find relics of things that happened before, in the before times, before people were living in silos, like a watch, a digital camcorder, a Pez dispenser. And these two characters fall in love. This character, George, presumably falls to his death. Rebecca Ferguson's character, even though she's a mechanic, she gets nominated to be the next sheriff when the previous sheriff says he wants to go outside to be, he can't take it anymore. He feels guilty, wants to see outside for himself, wants to know if his wife was right about everything, goes outside, and he dies essentially next to his wife. Rebecca Ferguson's character is nominated as sheriff. She was at first reluctant, takes the job, and in quick order, the mayor of the silo and Rebecca Ferguson's, deputy are killed. Now she's trying to figure out what's going on with those murders. Rebecca Ferguson, has been living, in the down deep for the past 20 years. Had a falling out with her father, who is a physician, because of something that happened with her mother and her brother who passed away. And then you have this entire judicial team led by the actor or musician, I'm not even sure what he is, named Common, which is so funny to me because I used to use, mediocre or average as like an insult or like a fun slight. But when you have like a big hulking, African-American dude with a cool beard, talks cool, at least in this show, maybe average, mediocre was a compliment. I didn't realize, the word common is cool. I thought, hey, if you're common, you're mid, you're average. That's just kind of a side note, but he leads up the judiciary team, and they're basically watching everybody. Like, there's no secrets in the silo. There's cameras, and they basically have more power than the mayor. Tim Robbins, who's the head of IT, becomes the next in line to be mayor after the mayor gets killed until there will be elections. And there's a lot going on who's really in charge and who's not, the power structure, how much freedom do people have, what's actually going on in the silo, what's actually going on outside. And the season, you get 10 episodes, which is, great considering most, hour-long dramas. And these, aren't hour-long, could be 50, 55 minutes, 45 minutes. But most quote-unquote hour-long shows, per season are 8 episodes. So to get 2 more episodes, I feel like I owe someone at Apple TV a hand job because, thank you, got 2 more episodes. But I learned that, well, obviously this show is based on a trilogy of books called the Silo Trilogy. Season 1 of the show ends at basically the halfway point of book 1, which is titled Wool. Book 2 is called Shift, and book 3 is called Dust, which I'm listening to. I'm listening to Wool, and I'm more than halfway through currently. And I understand the changes between the book and the show. But listen, I really liked the show. It is a drama. There's nothing comedic about it. It's not lighthearted at times like Fallout. And if you're saying, I already watched Fallout and that was about, people living in silos or vaults, why do I want to watch something, that's similar? It's not similar. Story drastically different, tonality drastically different. And it sounds like season 2 might be releasing sometime this year. So you got season 1 in 2023, season 2 in 2024. That's nice that they're going to be released maybe a year or a year and a half apart versus 2+ years apart that most, prestige TV seasons and shows are. And I like Rebecca Ferguson as an actress a lot. She has a a young or younger Jodie Foster vibe to her a bit. And I think she plays a very good reluctant hero role for everything that she's kind of put through in this season and in the book, which again is different, but I understand why the differences were made. I'm not going to review the book here. When I get through Wool, the first book, and the second book, Shift, I may give a review there just to, share what I've read or listened to. Just not quite done at the moment. But I would recommend Silo for those of you that like, dystopian future. It's not really science fiction, if you want to call it fantasy, but a good human drama centered around a mystery and an apocalypse that we don't know anything about yet. And lastly, comic books. X-Men, the Krakoa Age, that ran across numerous X titles, started by Jonathan Hickman in 2019, who wrote a parallel 5-issue, might have been 6, but let's say 5-issue series, 2 different series, House of X and Powers of X, which took place in 2 different kind of points in time. Essentially revolving around Moira McTaggart's character, who's been in X-Men lore for decades. It's revealed that she's a mutant, and she comes back to life after death. And Charles Xavier and Magneto discuss with her, up to this point, every time we've tried to, and now Magneto's like a good guy. We've tried to live harmoniously with the humans. We can't. They give her certain scenarios, and every time she dies, and she's reborn as a child, and she has to go through life all into like maybe her 20s or 30s, and then enact the plan that Charles Xavier and Magneto and she as an adult come up with. And they eventually, after I think like 9 or 10 tries, and these House of X books kind of go through what they tried and it didn't work, and then she gets killed, and now they try something new. They eventually get to a situation where there is a living together with mutants, a mutant utopia. It's an island called Krakoa where all mutants are invited to live peacefully. There's no mutant on mutant war. I mean, there's still some straggler mutants in the world that do not come to Krakoa. And there are still some threats that, the main X-Men title and some of the spin-off titles have to deal with. But by and large, humanity has accepted mutants, and mutants are living harmoniously with humanity. The series goes into Krakoa petitioning to become part of, and this is going back years, because again, this started in 2019, 5 years ago, either part of the United Nations or recognized as their own nation. And you still see that there's humanity has some doubts, but the, mutant scientists or gifted ones on Krakoa have developed medication that can cure any disease humanity has. And they trade that with humanity for, whether it's like statehood or nationhood recognition. So for a while, there's peace. And then obviously, humans just can't, they feel like, well, mutants are gods. They have this medication. They're holding us hostage with this medication, and mutants really aren't. An organization called Orcus is developed by humans to start fighting back against mutants. And there's like, I'm not going to go into everything about this. There's like this in the future component about sentient beings that come into being. There's mutants that live in something called a vault that go through hundreds of years in this vault before they come out, and they're more powerful, either helping or fighting the X-Men. I only read the main X-Men line of books, so I just kind of have one view of kind of what was happening. It's come to a conclusion now. What ultimately wound up happening was Charles Xavier winds up betraying the X-Men, giving Orcus the information that they needed to know. But Jean Grey, the Phoenix Force, and other mutants are able to overcome Orcus. This winds up ending with Charles Xavier turning himself in. He's put into some sort of a special prison designed by, Tony Stark, Reed Richards, among others. And this is going to kick off a new lot. And it ends with the island of Krakoa kind of rising out of the ocean, and I guess it floats away to somewhere else. On this island, X-Men were allowed to be reborn. They had 5 or 6 members of the X-Men team. When they combined their powers, were able to resurrect mutants that have died in these egg-shaped pods. So mutants were not in fear of ever dying until one of the episodes. The characters or the resurrection situation went away, so then mutants were playing for keeps. There was a scene where the mutants had a gala and humans attacked, and they were all sent through a portal to get them away from this attack, and it was thought that they all died, and Professor X kind of went nuts from that, thinking that he wound up killing millions of mutants, and it was later revealed that they kind of went someplace else. They weren't killed. Ones that did happen to die were brought back by other mutants that did have resurrection technology. So things kind of tied up, I'm not going to say in a bow, but relatively neatly. And we're now going to move into a new X-Men era in July with a couple X-Men titles kicking off. But for 5 years, I was really interested in what Jonathan Hickman started and Jerry Dugan, among other writers and artists, what they pulled through. So it was a very different out-of-the-box era for the X-Men characters. And I'm eager to see, starting in July, what their stories evolve into. And hopefully it's not more, same old, villain of the week, or the stakes were rather high. And the story did get a little bit convoluted in the middle portion or 3/4 of the way through with these sentient AIs and the future and what's going on in different timelines. I'm sure they're going to streamline that significantly. But I'm going to stay with at least one X-Men, the Uncanny X-Men title, and see where the X-Men quote unquote evolve from there. But that concludes the podcast for this week. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to make us part of your listening routine. Whatever you are doing with the warm weather, inside, outside, underground, outer space, sci-fi, whatever it may be, enjoy it. Be happy, be healthy, and stay safe. And we will talk soon. Take care.